Hello, boys and girls, ladies and gents. This is DafubFilm&TV, and I have just seen episode 5 of Ahsoka. So, without further ado, here is my review. There will be spoilers, just so you know. Warning, warning, warning. Here we go. There is relatively little action in this episode compared to some of the previous ones. There's no space battles. There's no kind of significant, anyway, lightsaber battles or fights like there was in the previous episode. But again, when I'm giving this review straight after watching it all the way through, and then partially watching certain sequences of the episode again. So my thoughts are fresh. When I get to ruminate on it for a bit and think about it a bit more and get other people's opinions, my views might change. But as it stands, from my standpoint, I think, it's from my standpoint, as someone who watched the Clone Wars animated series all the way through and considers the kind of two final episodes of that animated series some of the best Star Wars content made to date. Someone who is a fan of the Ahsoka character. I've also watched Rebels all the way through, and I've also watched the Bad Batch so far, although I'm a bit I think that show is a bit mid, to put it mildly. Again, mostly because of short run times and unnecessary filler episodes. Outside of that, for me, this episode was probably the best episode so far of the show, because I have seen the Clone Wars and I have the relevant attachments to both Ahsoka and, again, spoiler warning, Anakin Skywalker, who turns up here. The part of the episode that for me is the most kind of impressive, and the kind of pushes the buttons the most severely, is that in the parts of the episode where Ahsoka is in the world between worlds, we see her being instructed, shall we say, by Anakin in various ways, and as a consequence of this instruction, we get what is effectively a time jump back in time to see Ahsoka in live action at the age she was at the beginning of the Clone Wars, or the beginning of her involvement with Anakin in the Clone Wars, specifically a battle. I don't know the name of the planet. Again, maybe it was mentioned in the episode. I can't remember. I'm not sure if it was covered in the animated series. But you get to see, again, a battle sequence, or should I say battlefield sequence, from the Clone Wars. Now, obviously, this show has various restraints and restrictions from a budgetary standpoint, and they handled it in my view, very, very cleverly, and in a way that was very kind of artistic, which is that they're in a battlefield, but you don't really get to see the scale of it because it's been hugely kind of, what's the word for it? Not obscured, that's it, by a mix of smoke and dust that's been thrown up into the air by the battle itself. And it's very kind of, it seems to be on a desert planet as well, which obviously kind of helps with that quite a bit. And it's very kind of, it's very well lit. It's very well shot, in my opinion. I think they probably may well have done it in a volume, but it doesn't look like it, and it doesn't have any kind of the negative effects of that, certainly from my standpoint. Again, if I think about it more in the future, I might change my mind. But right now, I think it's a great sequence. The young actress they got to play a young Ahsoka, I think she did the role very, very well. She looked the part. Her acting was more than up to snuff. I thought Anakin when we saw him at the end of the previous episode, he was kind of de-aged, and it didn't look, it didn't, look as bad as it could have, but it was, clearly they de-aged him. But either they massively improved the de-aging between that episode and this one, or there are sequences in the episode that they just didn't use it on the actor who plays Anakin Skywalker, whose name I have somehow completely and utterly forgotten. What is his name again? Bum 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 bum. I can't believe. Ah, yes, Hayden Christensen. I can't believe I forgot his name, but Hayden Christensen. And in the sequences, if they are using de-aging tech on him, it's much more subtle, and maybe the combination, kind of the lighting and so on, helps to make it look more realistic or more effective. But he comes across much more naturalistic than he does at the end of the last episode, and maybe the just the beginning of this episode as well. But in the rest of the episode, he looks, to my eyes, perfectly legit, and I think it's really well done. I liked it an awful lot. It's I won't go into the specifics about what it's about, and it's kind of effectively Ahsoka trying to learn and get a particular, how should I put this, the term monkey, I suppose, we one off her back permanently, a psychological / emotional hang up, shall we say, to do with Anakin and, dare I say it, the Clone Wars. It looks, I think, again, it was really well done. I thought it looked great, and credit where credit is due. I think they pulled it off very effectively within the restrictions or whatever the budget on this show is. Although, again, they spent $200 million on Secret Invasion, and they had no sequences as good as this one in any episodes of that. To put it mildly, obviously the people who are in charge of this show are a damn sight more competent than the people in charge at Secret Invasion. But it looks, yeah, I liked it. Again, if you're someone who hasn't watched the Clone Wars, doesn't really know much of anything about Ahsoka, hasn't built up kind of an emotional attachment to her, and if you only really know Anakin from the prequel trilogies, and therefore the character didn't, grow on you the way he does in the animated series, then it may not have the same kind of resonance for you as it would for me, or for those who watched the Clone Wars, who've watched Rebels and so on. But again, it looked great. There's some actually pretty good lightsaber fighting in it, which is not surprising, because again, compared to the rest of the cast of this show, Hayden Christensen has had experience with lightsaber fights on a scale and has a level of formal training on them that probably the rest of the cast simply don't. So he acquits himself very well in that regard. Credit where credit is due. Now, whether he'll turn up again during the rest of the what's left of the season, there's now 3 episodes left. I don't know, and maybe you don't want to use him too much, so this is perfectly good for the episode. But considering they could have done a kind of member-berry nonsense, or they could have done who knows what alternative realities, or who knows, with the character, and again in the world between worlds, they didn't do that, and I think it worked. What they did do worked very, very well, and I was pretty impressed with it. Again, I liked it quite a lot. As far as the rest of the characters and cast are concerned, we don't see what happens to Sabine or the naughty Jedis. We don't, again, for General Syndulla and the New Republic forces, pilots that are with her, they basically spend their time patrolling around, scanning, looking for someone or something. They don't know what they're looking for, because they don't know what's happened. And it's again fine. This episode is really just about Ahsoka, and about dealing with certain hang-ups / again various weight, as it were, she's carrying on her shoulders that she doesn't actually necessarily need to do so. And I thought it worked out pretty well. I think it was, again, and I would say that this is not, I mean, this episode didn't feel like it was unnecessarily short. It didn't feel like it was too long for its total runtime of about 49 minutes, thereabouts. In other words, almost 50 minutes. So that's including previously on and obviously the credits at the end. It was, again, I think, well done. The time was spent well. And I think it's, again, I certainly liked it the best of every episode of the show so far, of this show so far. But it kind of puts into kind of, relief the problem with the previous two episodes, which is that they were both unnecessarily short. They should have been amalgamated into a single episode that was 50 minutes, a bit longer than an hour long. And that would have been, if you took those two episodes and put them together, that probably would have been actually quite a good episode. But again, they didn't do that. And I assume it's because they're, again, like with Secret Invasion, they're making the episodes unnecessarily short because they need to stretch out the season run over a certain minimum number of weeks. And it's, it's hurting the show. It's, if the episodes were more of the kind of length we're seeing here, maybe a bit longer, 50, 55 minutes, you have the time on screen, things can actually happen, that would, help it immensely. But the show has been hurt. I mean, yes, there was a lot of very good direction and by far the best kind of fight sequences and choreography we've seen so far in the previous episode. And not only that, but this is, we've seen actually Hayden Christensen does such a good job in terms of the lightsaber stuff. And there might have been some stuntmen stuff doing stuff as well there. But again, this is someone who was in two of the prequel trilogy movies and had the kind of formal training to go along with it. And I'd say he was practicing and good form, because again, he does in my opinion, a very, very, very good job here with what he's got to do. And I think there's also, because of the way things are shot at certain angles with the Ahsoka, with him and Ahsoka dueling with Ahsoka, again, spoiler warning, it's shot at more of a distance where it could possibly that there was two stunt actors in their places using their lightsabers against each other in certain parts, but in other parts I think there was close enough. There was definitely Hayden Christensen. And the quality of the kind of the saber work, as it were, was, very, very, credit where credit is due, very, very good. And, it kind of, it shows, I mean, that the direction, the choreography, the editing of the previous episode really kind of helped to maximize the quality of the lightsaber fighting, which, dueling, which was terrible in Obi-Wan Kenobi and has been at best, wherever we've seen it since, has been at best, deeply kind of, have we seen any more lightsaber dueling in between them? We had Book of Boba Fett, not really. The Mandalorian, obviously, season 3 has got a lightsaber in it, so technically, yes, the Darksaber. But this episode's got some, in my view, it's not necessarily a lot of it, but it's got, I think, the best lightsaber work we've seen from a Star Wars show to date. And it just shows you that you kind of need kind of maximum time to, or at least a certain amount of time to train up the cast to get them genuinely, physically quite proficient in using it, and also just physically fit to be able to move around and do it convincingly. Last week's kind of editing, direction, choreography kind of helped to mitigate the kind of weakness of the cast in that regard. But here you're seeing, I think there's not much of it, of lightsaber dueling between Ahsoka and Anakin in this, but there is some, and I think it's some of the best we've seen in certainly Star Wars television to date. Vastly better than what you saw in Obi-Wan Kenobi, which again, you might say, might be the argument that, that actually it was stunt people doing and not Hayden Christensen, because Ewan McGregor was also in all 3 episodes of the prequel trilogy, so he got even more training than Hayden did, than Mr. Christensen did, and that didn't help it at all. Although again, I blame the combination of what technology they used for the lightsabers, the terrible cinematography, the bad to terrible direction, and the bad fight choreography for why Obi-Wan's lightsaber sequences were just so bad. And this is, again, both this episode and the previous one, much better than Obi-Wan, and certainly a step in the right direction. And as I said already, again, repeating myself, this is, I think, for me, the best episode of the season so far. But the problem is that the two previous episodes were at best, if the last episode 4 and episode 3 had been one 50-minute plus episode, which they could easily have been, because when you take into account the previously on section, the beginning of the episode, and the trailers in the end, both episodes are less than a half an hour long each, give or take. So they could easily have been amalgamated into like a 50, 55, maybe an hour long episode maximum. And that would have been a genuinely, not as good as this episode, but it would have been, a much better whole than the two kind of separate pieces on their own. And again, Disney, by penny pinching, by saying we're only going to spend this amount of money, you need to have this many episodes within this budget for the whole season, so it's on the air for this number of weeks. And so you get episodes like episode 3, which is very short and nothing happens, and it's frustrating. And then you have episode 4, which, again, the best, best direction and choreography, much better than Obi-Wan Kenobi. Credit was credited to that director. But again, it's a very short episode, and that by that alone is frustrating. And this is not a sitcom. This is not an animated show. There's no justification for the episodes being, when you take into account credits at the end and previously on sequence at the beginning of the episode, less than half an hour long each. I mean, they're literally animated cartoon show length, and that is, to my view, unacceptable, and it's hurting us. This show needs to be overall better than mid. It has a job to do, and that job isn't to keep eyes on Disney Plus. Its job is to rebuild an IP that Disney did not understand when they acquired it, and because they didn't understand it, didn't understand the characters, didn't do the work, the due diligence to truly understand the IP, so that they could make high quality content based off it without damaging the IP and or antagonizing the core fan base, who make it a quote unquote 4-quadrant property. These are the people who buy the video games, buy the figurines, the toys, buy the merchandise left, right, and center. And Disney has, spent the time that they've owned the IP systematically antagonizing that core fan base to the ninth degree. And they really need, to rebuild the esteem of the IP. They need to rebuild the support of that fan base, get people kind of enthusiastic, re-energized about Star Wars. And I think this episode is very good. As I said, certainly right here and right now. I might change my mind later on. But the problem still remains. One, the reason why I like it so much is because I've seen the Clone Wars animated show. I've seen Rebels. And so I'm invested to a degree in the characters, and more normie Star Wars fans, let alone the general public, would have no, understanding or emotionally vested interest in these characters at all. And making things, even worse, the season up until now has been, again, in the case of, the last two episodes, the last episode 4, very good in terms of the lightsaber battle stuff, dueling stuff was great, very well shot, very well directed. Again, credit where credit is due, but it was too bloody short, and so when it ends, it's frustrating. The episode before that, number 3, basically nothing happens, and it's short, so it's both nothing happens and it's frustrating. And episode 1 and 2, there have been, again, people complaining, well, how is it Sabine gets stabbed through the torso and doesn't die the way Qui-Gon did in episode 1. Spoiler warning for those who haven't seen it. And, so on and so forth. And, I can't, I don't have an answer for that. I'm sure there's some nerdy answer about, Qui-Gon got stabbed through the spine or something, or the lightsaber stab he received was too close to his heart and it got incinerated and that's why he died, rather than just damaging some of the but not all of the lungs and maybe a couple of the other organs. If you lose one kidney, that isn't going to kill you. And again, because of the way lightsabers work, they cauterize any cut on the body they make. You can't bleed to death from a lightsaber cut. So you've got that too. But even again, I'm going to get into the nitty gritty here, but suffices to say, because of the fact that I liked the Clone Wars animated show, I liked Rebels. I watched every episode. It's been a while since I've watched particularly the earlier seasons of Clone Wars, and they may have aged quite badly, but they're remembered fondly in my mind. And the problem, the core problem with that is, how's the rest of the audience who's not, hasn't watched those animated shows, how much are they going to be into this? How are they going to react to this episode? And what, is that are they going to be just sitting there and, well, what the hell is this all about? And again, do they even really know or care who Ahsoka is, and so forth. And so while I really liked the episode, the combination of 2 unnecessarily short, frustratingly short episodes, one in which nothing happened, and then the 2 previous episodes before that, which were longer but were not necessary. They were better than what we've had much better than season 3 of The Mandalorian, much better than Book of Boba Fett, much better than Obi-Wan Kenobi. But again, the point of this show, the point of all new Star Wars content from here on out, has got to be to rebuild the IP's reputation and enthusiasm for it. And if the overall response from the audience to this is just going to be mid, that's nowhere near enough. So I may like this episode. We'll see how everyone else likes it over the next, at the time of reviewing this, next, say, 24 to 48 hours, couple of days. But the ratings for this show are apparently pretty bad, certainly in the US. Apparently 17 million people watched it worldwide. I don't know if that's good or not. Disney may have just cooked up that number out of nowhere as a kind of a panic PR move. Who knows? But I liked the episode. If you're a fan of Clone Wars, if you're a fan of Rebels, I don't see how you wouldn't really, really like this. Because of the callbacks. And again, Hayden Christensen does a great job in a variety of different ways, as does the actress whose name I do not know, who's playing the young Ahsoka. She's great. If the character had been in the original Clone Wars movies, or if the Clone Wars had not been a prequel trilogy of movies, but instead had been kind of almost a Game of Thrones style, big budget, multi-season running show, then she should have I think made a great young Ahsoka. But again, that's in a alternate reality of possibilities that don't exist, so there's no real point in fantasizing about that now, is there? But yeah, in isolation, I think it's an episode I really liked. But how the normie fans or the general public who are not familiar with her, not really familiar with, the fact that the Clone Wars or the prequel trilogy characters have been hugely boosted by, among certain parts of the fan base, by the animated series. And, again, we'll see how they respond to this. But I'm afraid that, again, considering what we've seen the rest of the season to date, that this is, not enough to begin kind of getting the IP going in the right direction with the right momentum, so that it becomes genuinely the phenomenon it once was, and was, even with the, one could argue to at least limited degree damage the prequel trilogy might have done to its esteem, considering that particularly the Phantom Menace was not well received at the time. I don't know if this is gonna, get things going in the right direction. Maybe if there's, the next 2 episodes are really, really good, that gets a lot of chatter online, and maybe people binge the entire season in on a single weekend, and that, fingers crossed, gets, momentum going in the right direction. But so far, they need to be making very good to great stuff. This needed to be the kind of the stat, from someone like Clone Wars animated series fan, all the rest, but yada yada. From the standpoint of a general Star Wars fan who didn't necessarily watch those animated shows, this show, this season 1, maybe the only season of Ahsoka, needed to be, in my view, probably as good as this episode is across the board. And it's just not, because, again, the 2 previous episodes are unnecessarily short and frustratingly short in their run times. And while episode 1 and episode 2 were certainly better than what we saw in the Mandalorian season 3, it's not enough, quite frankly. Now, it's also, as I've said in the previous episode reviews, that this might just all be, junk as far as most people out there are concerned, and that the reason why I think it's as good as it is because my expectations have been so severely lowered by the combination of The Last Jedi and what we've seen, again, season 3 of The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Obi-Wan Kenobi in particular, that that I think this is a lot better than it actually is. In which case, what are they going to do? I mean, I'm really, what are they going to do? What are they going to do, indeed? Anyway, this is DafubFilm&TV. I think it's a good episode. Let me know if you think it's a good episode, or good to very good episode, in the comments. If you haven't liked this video already, please do so. If for some strange reason you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I insist that you do. More subscribers encourages me to keep on going, as they say, keep on trucking. This is DafubFilm&TV signing off. Toodaloo.